to India Cloud Security Summit 2025. Um, First of all, I'd like to thank you everyone for joining in on a Saturday morning, and especially thanks to Microsoft and Panthera for having the sponsor so that we are able to host and present this event. With that said, I will quickly get started and just hold on your breath till the end. I have a quick demo to show in the Security Copilot. So with that said, I'll get started and let me just start. Obviously, before I start another thing, stay till the end. There's a quiz wherein that has exciting prizes, wherein we will pick up questions from the sessions and then ask you, and then there'll be prizes around that. Let me get started. So today's topic for me would be augmenting SOAR in Microsoft Security Copilot. And a little bit about the topic is, I believe we are all in the era of copilots, all right? Now, one thing, whatever we have seen so far, that copilots are a good companion. They can get you some information, right? And they can fast track your work. They can actually enhance whatever you're doing in terms of productivity. So same is applicable for Microsoft Security Copilot, which is the companion for the security tools. Either we call it Microsoft Sentinel or Defender XDR. It is capable of, joining with everyone, all the security product. It can go around Intune. It can go around Entra ID, like the entire Microsoft, estate of tools. And also apart from that, there are some third-party integrations available which you can directly interact. So now today's session is more about, yes, apart from interaction, right? As an analyst or as a security architect, you can do some things, but what if you are equipped with little more? So one is a little more, right? So a threat comes in and you as an analyst, you understand, okay, this threat is gonna, come in, and then is there a way to contain the threat, or is there a way to kind of stop it here itself, right? So for that, this idea came in of augmenting source, so that what happens from the security copilot console itself, as an analyst, I should be able to write a simple prompt based on my analysis, and that should be able to go back to the particular tip. It can be Defender, it can be Entra ID, it can be Intune, right? And take some actions. And for example, right, if we are analyzing a particular user and we found that the user is compromised, either a brute force, either a password spray or a phishing, whatever, right? So after the conclusion of an incident, right, instead of going that to the global admin and then telling him, okay, we have found this, just disable the account and things like that, right? So the idea would be just to run another line of prompt that we found this user suspicious. Let's try to block the user. Obviously the human in the loop is important, because when you do that, we have to really understand, right, who is the user. Because if it's a normal user, it's lots easier, but if it is a user with higher privileges who is involved in day-to-day operations, right, you might need to do some more checks around that. So that's where human in the loop is very important here. And augmentation of SOAR enables the particular human, right, to do more with, like, taking actions kind of stuff, right? So the containment of the threat becomes a lot and lot easier. So with that said, let me get started with the agenda today. I try to keep it simple. The agenda would be, we'll start with an introduction, which is basically we'll go around the analogy, what we are talking about it. Then we're gonna look at what plugin is. So just so that if you're new to the world of Copilot, plugins are the ways you connect your sources or available other sources to Copilots. That's called plugins at a very layman terms. And then we would be terming that as an accelerator, because that helps to make our job easier whenever you're using Copilots, right? Now then, it'll be a deep down to the architecture. So I'll try to break it down to the very granular level, wherein how you move. If you want to build this capability on your own, right? How do you do that? What is the architecture behind that? And what are the other components, whatever we are doing? And then obviously, we'll try to look at the plugin in action. When I say action, you're going to see in the security copilot, right? Once a prompt is written, how one prompt can actually, let's say, go and isolate a machine itself, right? After this architecture has been deployed. And then obviously, I have a demo around that, right? And then would be opening up for questions. But don't have to wait for questions. Feel free to use a chat for questions, and then I'll be able to answer this to the end, right? So the first one, introduction, right? So if you look at, right, if you take a little step back here, what is happening? Microsoft Security Copilot has transformed the way currently as of today, the analysts were actually triaging the incident. So imagine that before Security Copilot, right, you have a big incident queue, and then as an analyst, either it's L1, L2, L3, right, whatever, depending on the type of the incident or the severity of the incident, right, when it comes in, let's say an incident have an entity which is an account, or the incident have an entity which is an IP address, right? Or maybe both together. So as an analyst, our job was to kind of go and identify the account and go to the individual places. Let's say if it is an account, we go to enter ID, we go to enter ID protection, right? If it is an IP address, we go to maybe Defender. If it is a file hash, we again go back to Defender, look at the maliciousness, or we use third-party tools, right, to identify if the IP address was really, really malicious, or if the user has other compromises, or even we go to an extent that let's check what is the user behavior for last 30 days or 60 days. And for doing that, right, it used to take around, you write your queries, and there's no fix at set, though there were like incident response plan. But imagine there's a scenario that you're working on a really, really traditional SOC environment, and one incident comes in. It takes around 30 to 45 minutes to kind of only to come to the conclusion that can this be a true positive or can this be a false positive. Now, after that's happening, right? After that was happening, then Security Copilot came in, and then it basically gives one screen. You can just say that with a prompt book, you can say as an analyst, analyze this incident, right? It's going to do everything. It's going to go to Defender. It's going to go to, let's say, Enter ID. If there's an account, if you go to Defender again, if there's an IP, if you have a third-party integration, it'll go and check that particular thing, wherever that IP address was deployed, or just find the maliciousness of the IP address. Same thing goes for file hash and things like that. So it is capable of doing all the research what an analyst is to do. So the mean time to respond, like which you talk, is like mean time to detect or mean time to respond. Like these are the metrics as we use in SOC. They drastically came down. That's one way of it, right? Now the another aspect of that was, imagine that as an analyst, right? I'm coming from a background where I understand security, understand SOC, but I'm not very well versed with Microsoft ecosystem, right? So the learning curve become huge. Even to write a KQL query, right? You would take like really weeks to learn about it, to get skilled, and then start writing. And that's kind of a day-to-day job for analyst. So with this Security Copilot, all those things, all the barriers are gone. Now, if you look at the next level of the things, what you could do now. Imagine the SOAR part of it, where you try to contain it, right? In the SOAR, what happens? You want to write an automation, right? Obviously, you have to write an automation as an automation engineer, and then you have to integrate it, and then somebody has to call it. You have to find that right automation and things like that. Now, with this right mechanism, what can be done is you just call that automation from Copilot itself, and then that does the job. That automation can be an enrichment. For example, I'll pivot back to the same element. You have an incident, for example, brute force, right? That has an IP address, that has a user count. Now we want to go back, look at last 60 days sign in. We will need to go back and see if the user is flagged as a risky user into enter ID protection, right? Identity protection, or maybe something similar. So eventually what happens is all those things can be embedded as a part of SOAR. And then the response part of it, right? Like what if the user has logged in or user also compromised as a part of your detection research or as a part of your research as an analyst? What do you do next? Are you going to kind of go and disable? You have an automation, but still you need to just go and run that automation. Like you need to switch to the particular console of Sentinel, or you might need to go to Defender, whatever is the case. But with Security Copilot being the new console, for an analyst to use, they can start writing natural language prompt itself, which can help them to do the job. Now imagine that the initially what happened, Copilot came in, and the triaging time, right, has gone down. Now the response time also goes down, because the same flow of the prompt, right, you can technically write the same prompt, add on to it, you have that architecture deployed behind the scene, which can be a SOAR capabilities, right, and then go from there. Now obviously I'll say quickly what you'd learn. Obviously we talked about a little bit of quick capabilities, and then we definitely do a deep down what an automation is and integration is, because we have the definition. Let's say we're running behind a logic app, we are just, we're writing an Azure function behind the scene, whatever it is, we're going to take a deep dive here. And then I would say I would like to walk you through, like, even if it's the automation, what is the automation, what is the under the hood automation available, right? Like what exactly it works and how it integrates from your natural language to your, API calls. Obviously there's a real world demo, because as I said, a demo can be disabling user, a demo can be the demo of today is, we will try to show you a copilot prompt wherein once we try to isolate a machine, right, that's going to get isolated in defender. That's going to be the idea for the demo today. Now obviously, think about a situation wherein, in traditionally SOC analyst, right, used to go to hundred of tools, right, do this, do that, and then document the findings, and then come to a conclusion and send an approval to someone to disable or take an action. But here, you don't even leave the Copilot screen, right? You are in the Copilot screen. You don't even need to context switch, and you could start writing stuff that do this, do that, and it should be able to do that or perform that actions, right? That would be the wholesome thing for the session today. And obviously next thing, as I say, right, plugin as an accelerator. So again, a little bit about plugins, right? What exactly a plugin is? As I say, like, imagine that you're using Copilot, right? Copilot is like, comes with the basic capabilities. It can be integrated with your security tools, can be Defender. It can be like, anything, let's say Sentinel. It can be Defender for cloud, or maybe let's talk about a third party app, which is like non-Microsoft, let's say CrowdStrike, right? So, or maybe, yeah, Palo Alto, right? So these are the things which can run behind the scene, and Security Copilot gives you the plugin, right? Plugin gives you capabilities in terms of a couple of ways. Number one, you can have an API, right? You can have a KQL written, like these are the two things. And or you can also do some OpenAI specified YAML files, which is basically you can call another model technically, right, to do some isolation or do some action on behalf of you, right? Now, what are the advantages we're going to look at? Obviously, there will be something actionable, which is the outcome, and that will also help us to reduce the time to take action, so that you can contain faster. And here are some examples I have depicted. Enabling some remediation, which is real time, can be a block user, it can be a isolate device, it can be revoke token, right? Revoke and try to access token. Again, these are all very standard, but imagine this thing, that this all thing can be achieved without leaving the Copilot console itself. You will be able to achieve everything from Copilot console. Then imagine, then going further, right? Let's say you say that, there is a service now, let's say as a ticketing system, you have an automation set that if I log a service now ticket, my IP gets blocked in the firewall. Like, that's what the enterprise workflow looks like standard, right? Now that means, as an analyst, you find that, okay, this is a malicious IP, right? How do you do that? Like, you have to go to ServiceNow again, log into there, raise a ticket, then ServiceNow takes into action. Now the whole thing can be automated, fully. You can create a ticket from here itself, and then the ServiceNow ticket can be created, and then you have the rules applied or IP addresses blocked, right? Now, apart from this, right, obviously in this example, I have depicted all the Microsoft products, but if you want to have some third-party product, let's say you are using your own taxi feed, right? Or if you're using an OpenCTI mechanism, right? So what happens there is you should be able to integrate them together, get more information, right? Or as I give an example of custom integration, right? If you want to pull some information that, okay, this device has come in, let's say look at the service now also. If past 7 days this firewall rule has been modified for, let's say, 5 times, so that's the kind of custom integration you're going to do. And that's also a cross signal intelligence for Copilot, that because the ticketing system is being used in parallel with any SOC, what is the behavior there, right? So these are the things we're gonna tech. So obviously, if you have plugin, so plugin is your kind of, I would say, that's your accelerator, right? So that would be the catalyst to enhance the capabilities of Copilot, wherein you can keep writing Copilot. And I'm going to walk through, the Copilot plugins available one, and obviously how can you write your own one as well, right? So the essence of it, what it does, it basically, does this. as a plugin. Earlier, what you used to do, used to create an API, and that API used to, like, you have to run that, like go to the API, give manual input and run it, right? Now here it is integrated with human language, which Copilot understand very well, and then Copilot is capable of converting that human language. For example, I would say isolate host 1234, isolate host, and then I give the ID of the host. Copilot can understand, okay, out of that, this is my parameter, this is the English, and then from here, or this is the language, I would say, this is the ID, right, which I should pick up, and then it should pass on to the API call. Now it becomes a lot easier as an interaction, right? So now imagine that, from an expertise standpoint and from a learning graph standpoint also, even a person who is an L1 in SOC, right? That person also can be able to use or contain things or hunt or detect whatever more and more with only using Copilot without even leaving the screen, right? So obviously, so now the idea, and today's session, when I say plugin with SOAR, right? So that means you are not only enriching. Copilot is not only your companion for getting information, getting more and more information and giving you stuff. It also have a way wherein you can design it or deploy it in such a way that it can take action based on your command too. All right. So that would be the basically paradigm shift, I would say here, right? Now, as I say, let's keep it really, really simple, and then we'd quickly jump onto the architecture. So I've just depicted a very simple image. I'm going to talk through it, what exactly this looks like. So as you've seen, right, any Copilot, the fundamental thing or the basic input for any Copilot is the prompt, right? So similar here, once we have Security Copilot enabled, we should be able to write a prompt. Let's say, get me last 10 incidents, get me or analyzed incident number 223, 123, things like that. Then, what happens, obviously that has its own engine to understand, which I have not intentionally mentioned, because that's not the exact thing, because assume that we all have an understanding that Copilot can convert human language to morely machine readable language, right? Then what happens behind the scene, it calls Azure APIM. Why that APIM control is used? Because if you remember, if you open up a particular API with an APIM, the throttling is not there. The control, the other control which you can put in API management, right, that would not be feasible. And also with API management, the orchestration becomes a little smoother and better. All right. So that's the middle layer, I would say, right? And then once the request what you made, that is converted to a kind of an API call, and that API call is basically passed on, to a logic app in this case. Obviously, it depends on your use cases. If you have, let's say, a third-party app, right, you can definitely use Azure function too, right? So that's how the design is done. Now, in the logic app or function, Azure function, the possibilities are limitless, right? You can literally call another API. You can literally, let's say in this case, what I have tried to call is, security.microsoft.com, right? So that would be the one, and that's where this entire thing happens, right? Let me get into the further one where I could see, like, now if I break down, right, we saw there's a plugin, and what a plugin contains. As I said, right, the plugin contains basically three things here. The plugin has its plugin file and OpenAI specific file. So both the files are complementary to each other. When I say complementary, plugin file basically calls OpenAI specification, wherein you, in one file you define the parameters, in one file you write the specification, let's say exactly which endpoint it should hit, what should be the input, what happens if I get a 400 response, what happens if I get a 500 error response, what happens if I get a 200 success response. So that metadata of response, right, that's where you would be using, and you'll be writing in both, combination of both the plugin file and OpenAI specification file. I'll definitely try to get you the files by the end of the session as well, so that you can take a sneak peek of that. Then, as I say, Azure API management. So this is absolutely optional, depending on your use case and what are the measures and practices you follow. You can totally skip that. But the idea is, whenever we are trying to build an enterprise solution, right? Or let's take a step further. Now, imagine that you are a part of a service provider, a managed service provider. You manage hundreds of customers' security environment, right? And then in that case, you are building this capability, and then you would like to put some thresholding, right? Because that has a ripple effect in your billing, in your other features and things like that. So for that, this component is made available in case you want to do the thresholding, you want to, let's say, provide a particular key for each customer, so that you want to make it license based things and whatever you would like to do, right? API management is more of a additional layer for orchestration and security on top of your entire end, logic app or function app. And as I say, in this case, I have used HTTP trigger as a logic app that has action. It's a very, very simple logic app which has only three steps: the request, the execution step, and then obviously at the end, the action and the response, right? So with these three, that's the fundamental thing. Now, what next we're going to look at, exactly as I said, deep down detail the plugin file looks like. So if you look at, right, the plugin file looks like this. You have a descriptor, you give a name, which is where the plugin file would be called. You give a description, obviously used internally. You give, there are supported authentication type, which is Microsoft, which is available in Microsoft documentation, right? One of them were API keys, because as I say, right, you are building somewhere and you are exposing a capability which can take some action, right? So now that has to be secure. So here it is on API key, and then you can obviously, when you define or write the supported auth type, it defined the authorization as well. And here I am saying that, okay, what my authorization type is API key. And we are also saying that, so in an APIM, right, what is the parameter you're using and where you're using? So that's the key, right? X hyphen API key. This comes with default. Now, if you're using, you can change that key from X API key to whatever you want to like. Location is header. Now, if you want to do in body, make it post call, totally up to you, right? Auth scheme is empty. Now, skill group is something which, and this schema, whatever you're seeing, right? This is pretty standard. Like, it's not that you can, design it in own way. It has a couple of things: the descriptor, which talks about the metadata, the authorization comes with it, and then the second part is basically the skill group. There are KQL skill group wherein you can write KQL to enhance your, hunting capabilities. Let's say, as I give an example, if you want to do sign in check for last 60 days, right? That's where you can write a KQL skill and put that as a plugin, right? Then here we are going, because we're trying to take some action, right? Because KQL is again only for readability purpose, we need to take some action. Now that's where we are doing, and in the settings we're saying that go to this, YAML file which has the definition of the API. So I would like to go to the next file now, and if I go to the next file, so this is something similar. I'd not say same, but it is similar to a Swagger kind of a file for an API. So if you see this, right, obviously there is a version of Open API, sorry, and then there's information about title, description, and version. Version is important if you start doing, updates. Now servers is the where place where you put the endpoint, provided you have put in the KQL skill, or sorry, API skill here, right? So this is a server I've created, and then in the server you would have path. Now you can imagine, right, why APM is important. Let's say you are using a logic app or a function app, which is a direct, native URL, or say, there's a simple URL there with a key defined. You definitely don't want to, depict it here, right? That's where APM adds an additional layer of security. Obviously, if you don't want to use APIM, if you want to use a web API for your purposes, totally up to you. Just giving another options, an example. Now in here, I'm saying worker, and I would also say why the worker came in, right? And the paths and invoke. So this is exactly what I have mentioned inside an API, how to call it, right? APIM, what to call it. What is the operation ID? I want to isolate and host. Summary is isolating and host. These are important because this is where the better you write the operation ID and the summary and the description, right? The better it understand your text to API. So basically, if you look at these things, description, operation ID, summary, right? These three is kind of a learning or a small knowledge base for Copilot to understand that the prompt you're writing, to connect that prompt to your particular plugin, right? That's why we need to be very specific. And I've also depicted some example, right? So obviously this is kind of a domain name, or Copilot SOAR and then machine ID. I want to isolate and know more about domain name. So this is like, I'm just giving an example, so this might not be relevant in your case. You can build your own. And then the exact summary part wherein you are actually requesting your body, right? Or is I say it's a REST API call is what you're trying to make, right? It's content application, it's an object scheme. We want to pass the machine ID, obviously pass a description. It is a mandate one because that's the only thing we're doing. And then as I've spoken in the previous steps, we're going to look at the responses. What happens if it is 200? What happens if it is 400? That's where the co-pilot would understand, okay, the API has given me error, so I should write something based on that, right? So that would be the OpenAI specification is what the plugin contains. Then this is a little bit about the APIM. I just taken a screenshot so that can. So as you see, this is like when I create API management, right? We have add a logic app with a post call, and you see this name is worker invoke, right? And that's where, if you remember, I'd say go to that previous one and you see slash worker slash path slash invoke. So somewhere this is related, and this is where how it comes from. You see the front end URL is slash worker slash path invoke. So that's where you pick up the exact URL to call to and then bring it to your kind of apply and reflect in your particular plugin. And then obviously you can have your backend, which is the logic app. Here you can put your inbound policies, outbound policies, and that is what I was talking about, right? Let me go back to the previous one. So that means, like, let's say if you're using it as a, you want to license it, or you want to do it from an MSSP standpoint, or let's say, you want to do it for a multi-tenant standpoint. These settings will be useful, and that's why APIM would be very, very meaningful in this entire design here. Now, if I go to the next one, where we would go and kind of see that, I'd say let's go there. So this is, as I said, the logic app is very simple. It's a worker action to my isolate machine. I'm going to show you the logic app, while we are in the demo phase, and then it is responses. Obviously, I picked up response to be done in every phase, right? And then what it does. So worker is a HTTP process, right? Which basically takes the request, and in that we had parameters, and I mean, obviously, add your speed or something. I might need to change that action isolate is the second one that basically takes the SOAR action, and then obviously the response is the last one, which gives back to the APIM, and the APIM gives back to the Copilot, right? So that's how it looks like. The next one is, so before I go further, so I'd say, this is what the architecture looks like, and that's the whole component. Now the next thing is, you have built it, you've designed it. How do you test it, or how do you basically do it or implement it in your own instant Copilot? So this is a very nice thing, right? Don't need to go to Microsoft to publish something and use it for your Copilot instance. You can technically build, and when you build, right, even you are building, there is a way to test it that you don't even, as you see, there's a tag called private, right? So I'll show you in the screen what private means. So that exactly gives privilege. For example, me as a SOC analyst, or you as an analyst, or an architect, you are building that, right? You're testing it. You don't need to enable it, because initially, there'll be some back and forth, there'll be some testing required, there'll be some, maybe it is sensitive, right? So you can totally restrict the permission that who can use it wherever you are in the same Copilot instance. So let's say, obviously that should be there. Then when I go and upload the SOAR automation, I just turn it on, right? And when I say upload, right, that I'll be uploading the plugin file alone. That should be it, right? And that should be done here. And then we enter a secret value. This is the input to configure or connect to, APIM. So if I go a little back, right? So if you're, I'll just quickly just take a step back and then show you this authentication path, right? I was saying that API is the authorization method we are using, and X key API is the key, right? So that is the key we are going to use in the configuration when you configure the plugin, right? So then that's basically it. And you, as a part of workflow, you upload the plugin and you configure the key to authenticate, or let's say authorize, right? And then this is what it would look like. For example, and I have this done it, let's say, a while ago, right? I've had this at my Copilot demo environment. Investigate a machine of this ID. Obviously, you might get host name, but I've just used it for the ease of purpose. I've just got the machine and I used it using SOAR automation. So it did some automation, it did some analysis, right? At the end, ran the safety stage, composed a message, and then end of the day, it says that been successfully isolated using SOAR automation, right? And this action was triggered as a part of investigation process. So that's what this is a custom message I've written, but you can achieve it, right? So now imagine that you being an analyst or you being an architect, without leaving the console, you are able to take the SOAR actions, right? That's what the Copilot facilitates you, right? Now the steps are very simple, how you operationalize it, right? You write the prompt, let the Copilot, and when I say right, you see investigate a machine using SOAR automation. So this SOAR automation, right, I would like to go back to the previous tab where we are talking about descriptions. So you see I mentioned this endpoint allows to publicly quit Microsoft Defender, example prompts here, right? And then I'd say isolate a host is the name of the operation ID for the plugin, right? So that's why these are related. So the better you are documenting the plugin metadata file, the better your prompts will respond or pick that particular, particular plugin. So basically, if you look at it, it is saying that 3 steps completed, it has chosen SOAR automation, right? And then that's where it goes. Now I'd quickly go right prompt, let the Copilot identify, and again mention that, right, when you're really doing this is, as I'm presenting, I've done that in the past few times. It might look straightforward, but when you do this step, right, let Copilot identify the plugin, the rest of the piece would be literally, almost very easy part of it, because you can develop a logic app, you can build an APIM, you can build that JSON file, and I'd also be sharing all the resources which you're talking about, right, so that you can do a jump start there. But this testing would definitely need a few prompt analysis, right? Even I'm going to show you in my prompt, I have also tested, failed, and then succeeded, right? And then it planned to execute the SOAR, and execution steps are listed, and that's a good thing about it. And then response is printed in the console, and your work is done, right? Then let's time for the demo. Hopefully it works good. So for the demo, what I do is I will quickly try to get another screen here. All right. So this is where obviously Security Copilot, what I'll do quickly, jump through that. Security Copilot is the URL. The URL is securitycopilot.microsoft.com. And what I have done, I provisioned a SU, which is called Secure Compute Unit. So technically, this is where the place you would like provision your security compute unit, which is the Azure component, right? And then you can enable the billing and then update the secure compute unit, right? I have just started with one and then enabled overage capacity. That means it basically auto scales, right? And that will reflect in the billing. And you can also do a set maximum capacity, right? So that's what would be the case. Now once that is set up, let me quickly go back to the one. And as I was talking about, once the thing is developed, right, let's say you've developed that, how do you basically kind of upload it? So you would go to sources here. There's a quick little button right to the search bar here. Click on the sources, and you see by default in plugins. And I would go say, I'll just go to the ones which are turned on. You see there are a lot of Microsoft things available. There's one which is very unique, which is website, and there are custom. So for example, if you see, I have done a couple of custom, right? And each has its own settings. And then if you want to upload a plugin, all you do is you just, and this is another nice part, right? When you upload it, you see, uh, when we are testing a plugin, it should be just me, because you never know, somebody writes a prompt that hampers their workflow, your prompt to get additional SU usage, whatever is the case, right? So I would go for just me, and eventually you'll convert it to anyone in the workspace, right? You can do a Security Copilot plugin, which is a YAML file or JSON file, or you can do a direct OpenAI plugin. Both the things are available. Now going back to that, what I'll do is again scroll down a little bit, and just to show you there are non-Microsoft as well which are turned on in this environment. The list is huge and growing, right? So let me just get to the GCP one, and one more SOAR automation, right? This turned on, right? Obviously, another thing also, if you are not testing or if you are still in development, and you can still turn it off, right? So that it accidentally doesn't get used. Now I'm going to go to settings, and you see there's a value. So I have configured it already. That's where this value is there. And that was the API key, which I've shown in the demo, right? So that's about the settings, and that's all you need to do. You just pass on the input. And then if you want to edit the file, whatever file you've chosen, just click on the file. Either you upload as a link or you upload the JSON file, right? That's one time. So basically you don't have a editor here. You create the file in your VS Code or any other IDE you're using, and then upload it here. You can upload this as a link as well, whatever, right? And what file type you want to choose. So these options are available. Now, because I have already uploaded it, right? Let me quickly go to another screen. I have actually ran through and wrote a couple of prompts just for the interest of time so that I can give you a smoother demo. And this is what it looks like. So as I was talking about, right, when you see, look at the first prompt, I wrote the same thing. I want to, maybe I did a spelling mistake. I just testing it. So the machine ID is this. See, it couldn't find a plugin, right? Because the prompt is not that mature, or maybe my description was not good enough, right? Then I did some modification. And eventually, if you look at 3 steps completed, all I said, investigate a machine using SOAR automation. You see, it did 3 steps completed, chose the SOAR automation, right? And then, SOAR automation, and then what happens is processes request, and then prepare the response, and this is the response what I get. And if I go behind the scene, let me show you if I can quickly jump on to the logic app as such. So this is what is happening, and as a part of the demo, and let me get to the logic apps, and I would go for SOAR. Server demo, C4S server demo. I believe this is the one. This the second one. This is where I would go and quickly edit this. And as I've shown in the thing, right, all it does, receiving a request, and in this request, right, obviously you get the machine ID as a property, and doing the machine isolation and then commenting it and responding it, nothing empty, and you can respond it whatever you want to. So there's a simple logic app which would be called, right? Now, if you really want to look at the source code, I would say, which is the main code here, right? I have a GitHub repo, again, as I mentioned at the end of the session, I'll be sharing that with all of you. So now, whatever I have shown in the presentation, the logic app JSON is already available based on whatever I've shown. So this is for the definition. So if you want to deploy this in your environment, you might need to tweak a little bit, or even you can use the screenshot. It's a very simple logic app, as I mentioned, very 3-step logic app. You can have your own use cases, but HTTP request and respond to be mandatory for making it a plugin or basically behaving it like an API. You can also go ahead and then use Azure function if you want to, or web API as such, right? Now, the second one, as I mentioned, let's go to the metadata, which is the one we uploaded here. So this is the file which I uploaded in the Copilot instance. As I see, it's Copilot source, skill for this, API key, API header, and then I am giving a URL for the specification. Now, in the same repo, I have put the URL as well. So if I go to OpenAI spec URL, this is another one of which I wanted to kind of show. It has the same data info. Servers, obviously, this I'll be deleting possibly after the demo. But again, you build your own, and feel free to change this, right? And obviously, you write some prompts and change certain things, and that's how you go, right? So with that said, that was the kind of demo as I showed you, right? And obviously the machine got disabled, or machine got isolated in Defender, right? Now, coming back to the slides again, the next thing I want to do, obviously, open up for questions if you have. Right, I think there are a couple of questions. I'll try to answer them in the meantime. And while you are here, the GitHub repo, and what I've also done is I've actually written an article around the entire flow, starting from the design with the link to the source code, so that you can get all the resources by scanning the QR code. And let me also try to kind of give you, if I can, the link of that particular article you should be able to access to, right? So that's where the article is. Either you use the link or use the QR code, totally up to you. Now open for question. Now let me just quickly go through whatever. Can I build, the first question is, can I build my own integration plugins, for example, bring in insights from Palo Alto, Sentinel XDR? Sorry. Obviously, I mean, as I mentioned, right, like it doesn't need to be, there are ways, like you can do it from Microsoft, you publish into their public repositories so that it's available for everybody, right? That's more of like, if you want to build something which you want to use as a consumption basis kind of model. But apart from that, if you want to build it for your organization, right, or your own company or your customers, obviously you can, right? And then behind the scene, you can define your own architecture, right? Then is it inside Azure plugins? I mean, but I understand. All I need is there is nothing, no such thing as an Azure component, Azure plugin. It's all Copilot plugin. So basically, you're updating the metadata file and giving a link to one of the Azure resources. It can be a KQL query, but you can actually link it to, let's say, a web API. As I mentioned, if it is complex, you can link it to a logic app. You can link it to Azure function. Or maybe if you want to, if you're using multi-cloud, right, you can definitely log into, let's say, AWS Lambda, as long as you're feeling that, okay, that Lambda URL is safe, public, to be in public, to be accessible, or you can wrap it up as a web API. Let's say you have a proprietary tool writing in any, running in any of the other cloud vendors. All you need that and web API URL, wrap it around an app, API management, and then obviously that's where you should be able to complete that, right? So with that said, I would again open up for, if anybody have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. You can ask the question as well.
We have another 5 minutes left, and you can keep your questions posted to Samik.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, the link in the chat, let me also keep the slide. The next session is, so again, before I finish, I'd definitely like to thank you, Feroz, for moderating this, and obviously, all the organizers and the sponsors here to make this event happen. And special thanks to all of you, basically, to be present and listen to the entire session. And then I would say you definitely enjoy the rest of the session across the tracks, right? So choose whatever session definitely resonates and suits you, and enjoy the event, right? And the next session here would be by Indira, Indira Vandari, and it would be around protecting your assets with data governance and best practices in Fabric. Or is that the one, Feroz, or I'm missing something?
No, you're good, Samik. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. We shall wait for another 4 minutes, and we are waiting for the next speaker to join in.
All right. So yeah, I'd be then off camera and mute now. But yeah, you can share the link of an article that also has the LinkedIn one. So if anybody have any questions, need anything, from understanding perspective, right, to how to do it and whatnot, feel free to reach out. With that, thank you again, once again. Looking forward.
Thanks, Samik.